right. Good morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever it is for you. I'm Brent, an author, amateur world builder, writing educator. You can find me as werewolf-dr. on Threads, Instagram, Patreon, Ko-Fi, and YouTube, as well as here, or werewolf-dr and on Bluesky. That's that place. So today, let me get actually let's just throw all those links in there. There we go, so everybody can find them in the chat. And when this gets up to YouTube, I will make sure it's in the comments, or not the comments, the description. That's what that thing is called. Sorry, a little discombobulated today because we are on day 2 of extended break for the kid. One of the joys of being in the north, being in the what do we call it, the Midwest. We have winter break extended because of snow and because of single-digit temperatures. So they don't want the kids out on the buses, waiting for buses and stuff. So today, I didn't really have a huge amount in terms of kind of overall, overarching, guiding thoughts. Just check a few things real quick here. The heck? Oh, because of that. Okay, yes. Is that right? That's right. Maybe. Sorry, just checking something out here. Making sure I am all... Yes. Okay, cool. Hi. Mango King. Hi. How's it going? Just getting started here. Checking out a few things quickly. So anyway, today I didn't really have anything specific, definite in mind, although I was kind of toying with the idea of talking about... yes. Came in by thinking about things for particularly world building on the writing side of things. However, I'm happy to come by with some other stuff as well. Like I said, as I said in the intro, I am a writing educator, long-term freelance editor, and got a few publications under my belt. So a few things I could throw out there, depending on what you're looking at, what you're thinking about. What is it you're looking at as far as, just out of curiosity, what is it you're looking at as far as writing goes? Or doing as far as writing goes? If you don't mind my asking. While waiting there. So generally speaking, I tend to work with world building and that sort of thing in this particular stream. I was thinking today about looking at things with relationships between magic and society or education and society for world building purposes. But I'm happy to kind of go off on any other direction desired at will, because I didn't really have anything in particular in mind, so I'm just kind of running off the cuff, as it were. Oh, that's really simplistic, but that's okay. That's cool. That'll work. Just checking to see if I have any notes for some things. Okay. I think I'm also double check something really quick here. Jumping on that one. There was somebody who wanted me to tag on some stuff. Okay, so it's a reminder, throwing a reminder tag up here. maybe. There we go. Cool. Okay, tag him in. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and I will just kind of run off a little bit, I guess, with some world building stuff I've been thinking about working with. And if the person who wanted me to tag them shows up, I will go off on some side things as well. Since we've missed a few, since I think you missed the last stream. So we're thinking about, look at particularly magic and society with fantasy. Oh, here we go. Theme without coming across too hard. Characters in pursuit of a goal will not ultimately make them happy. Also, concerned story will not be well received. Ooh, yeah, I don't tend to do fiction narrative that much in terms of my own writing. Because I found a while ago that despite being published in it once in a tiny magazine, that it tends not to be my thing. But I think as terms of reception, it's always a tough question when we're looking at kind of whether things will be received or not. I think a good chunk of that is, from my perspective at least, is about finding audience. What I would probably recommend there that I found to be very helpful and a very positive route of things is, I don't know if what other kind of social media presence you have or are looking at, but I have found that the authors community, writers community on actually mostly on Threads, but also to a lesser extent on Bluesky, are very, very positive and very, very helpful, and tend to be very good with advice sides of things. But as far as reception goes, how well things are received, I think it depends a lot on what your goal is, as far as how much you want to be concerned with that. Is the goal to get the idea, get the story out there? Is the goal that is kind of more like a personal goal? Is the goal more to generate sales? Is the goal to those are probably the big ones, but I think when you think about whether something will be well received or not, and kind of concerns in that regard, I think the first big question for me is predominantly, what is your goal? What is it that you want to get out of this particular piece or this particular narrative? If the goal is just to have something out there, get this idea out of your head, get it out there, then reception is not necessarily a big issue. It'll find its audience in one way, shape, or form, or you can find the audience in one way, shape, or form. If, on the other hand, the goal is to generate sales, okay, yeah, if it's just to get it out, then I would not really be too concerned about it being well received or not well received. I think the idea in that case is just to get the idea out there and just kind of take it where it goes, what you're interested in with it, where you're at with it, and kind of see what happens with it. In those cases, a lot of situations, I think it's possible to find an audience for pretty much anything. The question is just how big an audience. Whether that's an audience of one or two, or that's an audience of hundreds or thousands or more. No, I don't think there's any obligation to do anything as far as that goes. I'd say writers, authors are... there is really no obligation as such, aside from, I would say, internal consistency. And it's not really necessarily an obligation, but I would say it does help to be as clear to be reasonably clear within the confines of a genre. I'm going to kind of hedge that a little bit. Because certain genres, for example, mysteries, suspense type genres are obviously going to be less, rephrase that, not so much clear in terms of content, but clear in terms of communication. The goal I would suggest on the perspective of writers, no matter pretty much regardless of genre, is that the reader should be able to understand the work, what you're saying, and that's really the biggest and possibly only obligation. Beyond that, it's basically tell the story you want to tell. Tell the story you've got in you. There is no necessarily, fiction can exist for lots of different reasons. We can have fiction that educates. We can have fiction that connects with people. We can have fiction that is almost simply there to entertain. I think there was I don't remember who it was. I want to say it was Steve Martin. Double check it, but I'm pretty sure it was Steve Martin, but it was probably somebody else. Yes, there we go. There's a wonderful quote from Steve Martin from his book, An Object of Beauty, that is, I think, really helpful. And he stated that, I believe entertainment can aspire to be art and can become art, but if you set out to make art, you're an idiot. That seems to hold up pretty well, in my experience at least. That basically we can find art. Art kind of happens in some regards. People who set out to make sort of, for lack of a better term, high literature, or I'll put it in a more kind of I know it's a little more kind of good old boy sort of setup, but highfalutin stuff tend to fall short or come across as very stilted, in my experience. Essentially, it's kind of like the directors who are trying to make the massively artsy thing, and it kind of falls flat. For example, I don't know what genre you're looking at, but I'm figuring out a good name to work with here. Ultimately, I'm going to throw out a number of different authors here. People like Fritz Leiber, Michael Moorcock, Tolkien, Ursula Le Guin didn't necessarily set out to make art as such. They set out to tell good stories, and stories that they found to be interesting, stories that they had in their heads and they wanted to get across people. We'll throw Terry Pratchett on there as well. Oh yeah, definitely. Especially in the martial arts side of things. Yeah, there's definitely. I don't know if you've come across him before. I'm going to toss a name. Let me double check it real quick to be safe, so I don't badly misspell it and mess it up. Yeah. Basically, most people who are writing, most authors who become well known and such are generally writing to tell stories, and they have a story they want to tell and they want to get past. And then later on, audiences bring things to what they have and sort of find meaning or elevate or whatnot with things. Because really we put a lot of stuff in unconsciously or subconsciously. Tolkien famously stated that there were no metaphors in Lord of the Rings, when in fact there are a heck of a lot of metaphors in Lord of the Rings. but they are not necessarily things he consciously put in there. They're things that just kind of came in because of his life when he lived, and kind of his philosophies and his outlooks on things that he wasn't necessarily consciously attempting to get in there. But they have been huge for the last almost a century now, in terms of their connection with people and whatnot. What he was predominantly doing was telling a story. And yeah, there's all the stuff about creating a mythology for England and all that sort of stuff, but I think that may be stuff that was kind of added in after the fact in some regards. This author here, let me actually capitalize things. I've been reading a fair bit of. Jin Young, who I've been reading a fair bit of lately, or off and on for a couple of years now. Martial arts books. He's kind of I think he's down as like Hong Kong's most famous author or something along those lines. The Condor series was probably his big one. Fonda Lee is also a great one. In both cases, they're basically just telling stories that they wanted to get out there. Fonda Lee was inspired by a mix of Hong Kong action movies and like The Godfather, and kind of combined these together. And she's just telling stories. But there are things going on in there that are connecting with people in various ways. I think if we set out to try to connect with people in that regard, it tends to fall a little flat or maybe come across as maybe forced. Whereas we focus on the narrative side, the storytelling, telling the good story, or telling the story you want to tell, that tends to come across as more genuine and more effective in a lot of respects. And while I acknowledge I totally have not written a whole lot of, I've only written one publishable piece of fiction. I did do my senior capstone project as an undergrad college with a collection of interconnected short stories. And I did publish one short story a long, long time ago, but I haven't actually kind of done more than dabble in fiction in a while. But I have spent a long time, many, 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 many years looking at studying, critiquing, etc. literature. 3 degrees worth, as a matter of fact. So that's, 10 years of post-high school doing that, plus most of my career since then, in one way, shape, or form. And I've worked with a number of people who do fiction in terms of writing, do a lot of fiction. A good friend of mine has done a number of works of fiction that I've taken a look at and helped out with she's there just kind of telling the stories she wants to tell. Her first really big-ish book, her second novel total, was actually inspired by a garden in Bomarzo, Italy. She wrote this basically time travel novel taking place in the, I want to say it was 16th, 17th century, Bomarzo, Italy, with a 21st century primary main character. That book went on. It's sold reasonably well. She's on a second edition now. And the book is sold regularly at the Garden's gift shop. Because she was telling the story that she was inspired to from doing tours in that garden that featured that garden. Her other one was a more adult erotica piece that came from her connections within certain communities in certain subcultures and communities in the U.S., and that has its own thing going on with it. But in both cases, her goal is just, I want to tell this story. I've got the story in my head. I want to get it out of my head. I want to tell it. I want to pass it on to other people, and we'll see what happens. I think that tends to come across much more genuine, much more effectively than the people who try to set out with, I am going to create high art. I'm going to elevate my readers, that sort of thing, which tends to come off as more, I think, stilted, more forced, sometimes more, I don't really want to say arrogant, but kind of people like that come off with that to some degree. In my experience, at least. But yeah, I'd say as far as whether something's going to be well received or not, just I'd say tell the story you want to tell. Get across the idea you want to get across. It's kind of it's your story, it's your idea, you're putting yourself into it in various ways. Yes, there's that too. There is some bit of being overly ambitious for experience. That could certainly come into play. At best, there's that. At worst, there's some hubris. Well, not even hubris, but more coming across as overly inflated, overly full of themselves, sort of experience. At least that's been my experience with some authors, some people I have met in those realms, and people I have gone through creative writing workshops with, or creative writing courses with, many of whom were just extremely full of themselves. But I went through my first creative writing workshops or creative writing courses in the mid to late 90s. Yeah, it can depend. Every piece of advice about don't write that book, save the burning idea for last in writing order. That could work well. The thing is, every author does things differently, and every writer does things differently. On a purely mechanical level, we can compare Stephen King to what's his name? Until I blink on another one of the big horror writers. I'm totally blanking on his name. If I saw it, I would recognize it. I think it was Dean Koontz. No, maybe it wasn't Dean Koontz. Maybe it was. It may have been Dean Koontz. So basically, Stephen King's method is just write. He knocks out an entire novel in about, a couple months. 300 whatever page novel in about 300, 400 page novel in about, a couple months. Then he spends 6, 8, 10 months editing it, revising it, cleaning it up. I believe it was Koontz who comparatively would spend one day on one page and then getting it to where he wanted it. Then he'd spend one day on the next page getting it to where he wanted it. So the one page may go through 10 drafts in a day. King, on the other hand, was just knock out the entire thing all at once, then come back and work things. And both of them very well known, both of them obviously living quite well off of their work, but both working very, very differently in terms of how they do things. I think that's something that it's good to take advice. It's good to collect advice, but it's also good to remember that every writer is different. And this is something I try to get across to my students when I'm talking with them, is what works for me doesn't necessarily work for someone else. How I do something doesn't necessarily click with how someone else does something. So it's a good idea it is good to take the advice to get the advice, but it's also good to keep in mind that just because this works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for someone else. So it's a lot of pick and choose. A lot of see what works, take what works, throw out what doesn't. Hopefully that may help somewhat. possibly. Really the big thing there, I think, is just kind of, since you're looking to just kind of get something written, get something out there, I wouldn't really worry about whether it will be well received or not. I said just get it out there, see what comes with it. You can always go back and revise it later. Advice I always give my classes: it's better to have words on the page than to have a blank page. If you have 500 words, 1,000 words, 30,000 words of absolute crap, you can go back and you can fix it. You can clean it, you can polish it up, you can modify it, you can tweak it. If you have a blank page, you can't do anything with it. So just something to kind of, yeah. yeah, I can see that. Definitely the 9 chapters published, too eager to get feedback out. Yeah, that definitely happens. But again, it still holds. You got 9 chapters. That's stuff that you can work with. You can finish off a draft of the piece, and you've got something you can clean up, you can fix, you can mess around with. Even if it's something that's like, yeah, I've got this drafted, I don't want to look at it anymore. You set it aside for however long it happens to be. You can always come back to it later, and you can always tweak it, polish it, mess around with it, change whole sections, all of that sort of stuff. With a blank page, you can't do anything. So, especially for a first draft, my general advice on any kind of writing, no matter what it is, no matter what genre, no matter what purpose, is just get words on the page. Because once you have those, you can mess around with it. If it's nothing, then there's nothing you can do with it. And honestly, take a look back at some of the, well, actually they're not in here anymore, but if you take a look at some of my YouTube channel, I've actually just put up a video from when was that? It was sometime last month. I think early last month, maybe. Let me check, because I don't remember. Videos, there we go. This was a video from, let me see the description on this thing. A video from, I didn't put a date on there. Ha! Oh well. I usually put a date on things, but oh well, I didn't in that case. It was earlier this month, I think, where I was talking about various ideas I had for a world build project, and things I thought were kind of interesting, and I was playing with, and I was toying with, and had kind of come into my head, and these sorts of things. Fast forward a week, and everything that I said in that video basically got scrapped. And all the stuff that I was thinking about working about, became parts of 2 different projects entirely. So, and that was the second iteration of those ideas. So because I had gotten some stuff down, I'd gotten some stuff jotted down in electronic form, and then I decided that, this isn't really what I want to do with this. This isn't really working out the way I want it to go, or what I want to do with this particular idea or thought. But I had words down. I could go back and I could change them. If I had the blank, it was all in my head. Yeah, I could still potentially change these ideas around, but it's much easier when they physically existed in some way, shape, or form, even if it was just on screen. So it's a really good. It happens to everybody. Everybody changes things. We make all sorts of different modifications and whatnot. That first draft that Stephen King knocks out in 2-3 months is nothing like the final version he sends off to a publisher, a year later, or 6 months later, or whatever it is. Because we always go through, we always change stuff around a lot as we're looking at things. We take a look. I think there's a library. I want to say the Bodleian Library definitely has some of it. I think there's a library in Texas that have some of the early drafts of things like, Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, that sort of thing. And if you compare them to what got published in the 40s, 50s, there are some significant differences going on. Oh, no, that happens. No problem. We've got a lot of snow and wind going on right now, though the snow seems to have The snow seems to have slacked off a fair bit today, but we still have single-digit temperatures and wind going on. That's what VODs are for. I also save everything because I'm on not a affiliate or partner yet. I save everything on download all the videos and upload them to my YouTube channel at some point in time. It may take a little while sometimes, but like I think I had 5 in the last few days because I realized I'd been sitting on about a month and a half's worth without doing anything with them because, things get in the way. Stuff happens. But, there's fun stuff that you can play around with that and just kind of see what goes on. I would say, hey, you're on a good track. You're heading in a great direction as far as getting things down, getting some feedback. Feedback is not bad. I would generally, if it's something big like that I'd be working on, I would generally wait till maybe a second or third draft to kind of put up anywhere or something like that for feedback, because then you're going to be a little more polished with it. But that's me. Oh, does writing get better? Is it always this hard? Yeah. I will say it depends on who you ask and what they are doing. For me, I have been writing off and on for almost 30 years, 40 years, 30 some odd years. Publishable in the last, I think my first publication was about 24 years ago, almost 25 years ago. I've since done couple academic articles and 3 books, and each of the books was difficult in its own way. And I've been doing continuous world building. You check out my website, which is the first link up at the top from Nightbot, and I've got a bunch of free stuff on there. I've also got a big world build I'm working on right now. And yeah, it's always, I will say for me at least, it's always rewarding and it's always fun, but it's also always difficult in its own ways. And that's true of anything that's worth doing, frankly. I also do, I used to be a trumpet player back through like my first year of college. That was always rough, but it was fun. It was good. It was worth doing. I've been practicing learning a Japanese martial art called Aikido for about 16 years. And every single time, it's just every single day I'm into a class, I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. But it's worth doing. Yeah, it's hard. It's difficult. But yeah, thematic joke of soul, younger fish swims to an older fish. I want to swim in the ocean. You're already in it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the destination is nice, but every time there's a destination, there's a new destination after it. Each destination, I think, when we're writing, is a layover or a way station, if you will. That every time, like right now, I'm kind of at a plateau. My last book came out in fall of 2023, and I've been taking some time off from that kind of writing for a bit, just to kind of get my head back settled and all that sort of stuff. And because I've been more interested right now in doing world build writing. But I also did 2 back-to-back nonfiction world building guide books. So that was roughly, they were published about roughly 2 years apart. So that was about 4 years of my life was basically in those 2 books. or was basically focused on those 2 books, plus, of course, family stuff and work and all that sort of thing. So taking some time away from that has been kind of nice. But that destination, book 3, has kind of led to a jumping off point, or was a jumping off point to this big build project I'm working on this other side of things, and to jumping into doing streaming, which I've only been doing since September. So, it's I think yeah, journey over destination definitely is a big thing, and I think each destination, particularly when we're dealing with writing, it's a layover. It's we're flying from, I don't know, let's say Hartford, Connecticut to Adelaide, Australia. We're going to have spots where we're going to have to pause. We're going to have layovers. We're going to have to, stop off in say Chicago or LA for a layover before we head off to, we're up to wherever else, to the next step on the journey. And even when we get to Adelaide, we're going to have further journey and carry on there. So that one itself is a layover or a way station for a bit. So, yeah, I think the journey over destination is a good way to look at it. But then kind of keeping in mind that every destination is going to not necessarily be a stopping point, but is a end of a stage. And there's another stage coming on after that at some point in time, probably. And sometimes we may stay at that stage for a while before we jump off to another one. Since you're looking martial arts book, martial arts in terms of novel and such, you can kind of think of it too as sort of like belt ranks. I don't know if, I'm assuming, since you said that it's a martial arts novel and you're using real techniques, I'm assuming you have some kind of background, perhaps, with one or more martial arts. Okay, yeah. So you got the jiu-jitsu, you got five belt ranks, yeah. So each of those ranks, when you started, it was probably extremely difficult. And then it got a little bit easier. The stuff you learned at the beginning got easier, but you learned new stuff, which was also difficult. And then that new stuff gets easier, and then the new stuff after that gets more difficult. And each rank, or each belt rank, is sort of a intermediate destination, in a way. And ultimately, even the highest ranked people are still learning things. They're still on a journey. They're still picking up new stuff as they're going on. Aikido, we have 6 white belt ranks and technically 9 black belt ranks. But even the head instructor at the school I'm with, who is 5th Dan, still learns stuff from some of the 6Q beginners sometimes, because we're working with different people move in different ways, people do different things, people respond to things differently, different body types and all that sort of stuff comes into play. So techniques work differently in some respects, or have to be done slightly differently, somewhat differently adjusted, based on who we're working with. And so even at the highest rankings, at the destination, we're still learning stuff and still having new things to find out, and still, I guess if you want to put it this way, pushing boundaries of what is done and finding out new ways to do things that are difficult at first and then become easier as we get used to them. And then we find new things to work with that are difficult as well until we get used to them, and so on and so forth. In fact, tonight, assuming that we don't get cancellation, a fellow student who is at the same, just relatively recently reached the same rank I'm at, is going to be teaching their first class, or leading their first class, and is a little concerned about it for various reasons. Especially if people who are of higher rank than they're at show up. And we were having to talk about this Sunday about basically, don't worry about it. You know, if you are the one who is leading the class, you are the one leading the class. If there's someone higher ranked there, they are there as any other student. But this is a new kind of destination, new sort of hurdle for them to kind of get over in their journey. And all that, of course, ties back into the writing. Yeah, definitely. All of these things are, we practice, we play with things, we try out new stuff. Does it always stay hard? Sure, because we push the boundaries. We're saying, okay, here's what I'm used to doing, here's what I typically do. Can I do something bigger? Can I do something, more involved? Can I do something that's this thing instead of that thing with writing? Quite often, all the time. It took yeah, people don't, that's one of the cardinal rules of any martial art. You don't ask for a belt. You wait till the head instructors approach you, or in our particular place, because it's a more traditional art, you can approach the head instructor and ask, what are my hours looking like as far as my my hours toward my next rank test? What are my hours looking like? And then that's kind of a respectful way, or seen as a respectful way, to just kind of check in and see where things are. But ultimately, it's the head instructor's decision, and depending on which school or which branch you're with, that can go a couple different ways, because we still have some branches and some schools that are led by, technically our organization is led by older Japanese guys who, don't take, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is a certain amount of meritocracy. There's, it depends, of course. There's also that, there's a fair bit of, I tell our students who are looking, our junior students who are looking at testing for ranks and that sort of thing in martial arts, basically what I got from working on working in higher ed and going through my different degree ranks, my different degrees and things. So the doctorate requires a oral defense, where you spend however many years, 1 to 8 years, writing a dissertation, writing a big research project, and then you have to have like an hour and a half defending it, where your committee gets to ask you all kinds of questions, and may have another person comes in and they're also asking questions and that sort of thing, and you're essentially defending your research and such. The director for the dissertation, the head of the committee, will not let you do the oral defense unless they are 95% certain you're going to pass it. Likewise, they won't let you do your qualifying exams, which you have to do before research and writing dissertation stuff, unless they're 95% sure you're going to pass it. So that basically, there's not really any reason to get nervous about testing for rank or whatnot, because the head instructors won't let you test for rank unless they are certain you're going to pass that test. And of course, there are weird situations that come into play. Case in point, you've got the Steven Seagal situation, where he basically married into rank or belt ranks, for all intents and purposes. There are lots of weird things going on with that, and even in the Aikido, he's technically part of the Aikido community, but hardly anyone, if anyone, actually likes him in the community. He has made a lot of massive faux pas, and he's a bit of a jerk. Right. Yeah, I suppose in some situations that's certainly feasible, possible. And obviously, I'm not sure how jiu-jitsu works. I know All right, you are just coming in to... Sorry, I need to go into my moderating tools here real quick. There we go. Cool. Hey there. There's Peter. Awesome. How are things going? We were just talking about kind of writing in general for the time being, but kind of getting off track a little bit, but that's okay. All kinds of fun stuff. I had intended to talk Magic and Education Society. We kind of got talking about writing and novels, and then we got into some extended, okay, and you're heading out. Well, good luck. Have a good day. Hope things go well. And good luck with the writing. Happy to hear if anything else comes up with it or how things go. Definitely. See you there. So what I was looking at briefly, or thinking about looking at, was sort of Magic in Society, which has kind of been going off on about 50 minutes of general writing stuff, which is fine and awesome and fun. That's why I'm down at chatting and have no general idea of what I'm doing. I guess I'll swing back over to the Magic side of things. Maybe Jack will show up. Possibly he will, possibly he won't. We'll see. Jack, that is, of Gods and Game Masters. Shoot, who's this character in Castleton? Yeah. Anyway. Oh, here we got someone else. Who do we have coming in here? Is it somebody I recognize? Probably not. So one thing I was looking at or thinking about, and this guy actually came a little bit off of one of Jack's streams a while back, was kind of how societies, how cultures work with this idea of, or approach this idea of magic and whatnot. And I once tried to tabulate some things just to make it kind of random, but that didn't really work out so well. But it's a nice little checklist for myself. Or I can think about the kind of education side of things, which is kind of what more Jack was looking at more recently, which is also kind of fun stuff. You know what? I think I'm going to go that route, just because why not? We were already talking about some things with... We were kind of shoving that way in thanks to some shifting from writing to kind of martial arts practices and what do you call it? The links between some links and connections between them via analogy. So why not? This is just some things I jotted together quickly based on. Let me see if I can do this. I don't know if this will let me do it here. Nope. Okay, not already in there, so I can't do that. Okay, that's fine. Basically, I came up with a list of some quick questions for putting together academic institutions, schools, universities, whatever, in fantasy fictional worlds. Primary one, right off the bat, is asking who founded this thing? Who is the one who created it? Or how did it come about, essentially? Because that can be kind of helpful for figuring out what are we doing, where are we going, what's up with things, what kind of feel does it have, what kind of vibe is going on, that sort of stuff. And you can get some weird stuff out of that. Really great example is GURPS IOU, or GURPS Illuminati University, which was, double-checking the cover title there, which was created by the founder. The founder, let me see, there's a great description. There's a great description in here of the founder's statue. That is awesome. If I can find it again. I'm totally not prepped for anything. There we go, 71. Okay, cool. table of contents, come to my rescue. So the founders described the center of the pent, a large stone statue rests atop a 5-sided marble pedestal. Time, wind, rain, pigeons, and the depredation of frat pranks have worn the statue into a vaguely humanoid shape, with a distressing suggestion of facial tentacles. Well, maybe it always did have tentacles. There's a simple brass plate at the base of the statue which bears the nearly indecipherable word Yarblek. The meaning of this word has been lost in time, and none of the university's personnel records seem to refer to it. Radioactive dating techniques indicate the statue is older than the universe. This sets the theme, this sets the idea for IOU, which is an awesome, wonderful book. With great art, with wonderful art by Phil and Kaja Foglio. By the way, of Girl Genius fame. So we look at who founded it, who created it, where did it come from? Is this founded by a government? Is this founded by a private individual? Is this founded by a collection of people? These sorts of things can give a lot of the vibe, the feel of the place. Next thing I look at would be, what does it teach? Are we looking at, mundane subject matter? Are we looking at, arcana, magic stuff? Are we looking at specialist things? We could have temple schools that are being run by temples for various deities or whatnot. They could be running all sorts of different things coming into play with that. We could have, last week I talked about the British Inns of Court, which were created by various law specialists near the royal courts in London, as a kind of specialist place to teach British law, because British law at the time, by the 16th, 17th centuries, was written in three different languages. It was in English, French, and Latin. And the universities like Oxford, Cambridge, and such only taught Latin, so that made it a little bit difficult to only taught in Latin, which made it difficult to do things like law in that case. But we can have general coverage of all kinds of what we would consider mundane topics, history, languages, medicine, all that sort of stuff. We could have specialists where it focuses in one particular area. So say like we could have we'll throw out, I'll use Yarblek. The Temple of Yarblek could have a school that they particularly have to train new clergy, or something like that. So it focuses on things like theology and different maybe things that are part of Yarblek's sphere of influence and whatnot. Probably administration, bureaucracy, that sort of stuff as well would fall in there. Those things. We can have arcane specialty, where you have your classic magic school, which may also have other topics and subjects coming into play, so that you have not only the theory and practicum of arcane stuff, but also maybe history, or maybe languages, or maybe that could be useful with things, or maybe some anthropology, or multiverse studies, or things along these lines, for a little more of a practical bent in some regards. A great example of that is actually Naomi Novik's Sholomance trilogy, where the school is predominantly magic focused, but in order to learn magic, many of the individuals learn multiple languages. So they also learn some essentially, I guess we would call it cryptozoology of a fashion, or thalamic zoology might be a way to put that. Teratology, another way to put it, monster studies. So that they're learning not only how to use their ability, but also learning languages because in that particular world, translating a spell from one language to another language doesn't work. If we have a Russian spell and we translate the Russian words to the spell into English, the spell doesn't work. It has to be done in Russian. So in order to cast the spell, you need to learn Russian, so on and so forth. Other big thing that I bring up or think about with, say, fantasy university, fantasy education questions is who can attend. Because as with our own history, as with our own world's history, rather, education may be limited to certain people. And this may also depend on what's being taught. This may be tied to a lot of different things. So it could be based on ages. There could be a cutoff age for starting with a particular educational institution. There could be for fantasy worlds, there could be a race/heritage/lineage limits or requirements for particular places. Maybe the place only accepts elves. Maybe the place does not accept everybody but elves, so on and so forth. There could be gender/sex-based restrictions. There could be nationality-based. There could be talent-based, if this is a arcane school, and the world is basically having magic requires having a particular, say, genetic talent, then that will limit who can be in this particular institution. There may be tuition-based limitations or restrictions. In an ideal situation, we might say, yeah, anybody who has the ability to be there can do so, but we know in reality, for the most part, in most worlds, most settings, there is going to be a limit on paying for that education. As we talked about last week, even in the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, a year's worth of university education cost about the same amount as a master craftsman or lawyer earned in a year. So this obviously shut down a lot of potential people coming in, aside from some church individuals, some monks or whatnot, who were being paid, who the church was paying for to send to the place. Despite the, I think it was 1189 popes, I think was one of the Alexanders, attempts to call for free education. So this is not a new, current attempts to call for tuition-free education are not new. It's been about 1,000 years we've been pushing for that in various forms. Other questions that come to mind, kind of physically speaking, could be, is this institution in one space? Kind of like most modern American colleges, where you have generally speaking, have a clearly defined campus, where yes, there may be several buildings to it, but they're all kind of in one area. Whether that area is relatively small, I'll use my undergrad as an example there, where it was about 3 or 4 blocks on the side, roughly speaking. You could walk from one side of the campus to the other within 10 minutes easy. Or is massive and sprawling. Good examples there. I'll use like Penn State, which is a small to medium-sized town in size, or Ohio State University, which is like a small city within a big city. But most of the buildings, most of the things are in a defined area, and they don't really kind of spread out beyond that area too much. Or it could be a scattered area, where it's scattered all around a city. A good example there is Oxford. Oxford is made up of a bunch of different colleges, and each of those colleges are kind of scattered and apart from each other. They're not one unified place as such. You have college, you have town area around it, you have college, you have town area around it, etc., etc., etc. That can make a difference in terms of how things feel for an institution. I think as one united space, that's going to be probably more cohesive in a lot of respects. If it's scattered around, then you get a lot more space for each of those individual sections being kind of self-contained in many respects, or seeing themselves as being separate from and different from, rather than unified with the others. And those also add to that vibe that comes back from the who founded it side of things. Other good ones, let's see, what else do I have down here? Tiers of students. Do we have one tier of students? Do we have multiple tiers of students? A good example of this, we take a look at modern universities, where we have the bachelor's tier, or the undergrad tier, and then we have the graduate tier, or the master's or doctorate level tiers of students. One that I tend to use myself when I'm building in these cases, and I'm working with something on right now, is to have one tier that is students and one tier that is senior students. The senior students are ones who have graduated. They have gotten through the general curriculum program, but then have stayed on for more advanced studies or more advanced research, depending on what their route is. Which of course gives us the question of how long does it take to graduate. So we get a minimum time length. The typical traditional student, traditional Western, Euro-American university tends to be, 4 years for the undergrad. Yeah, some people get out in 3. These days, 3 is becoming more common because we got a lot of high school kids taking college level courses, that sort of thing, at least in the U.S. We even have sometimes middle school students taking college courses, which is really not a great plan, but I have seen it. It's not so good. And then we add, extra time for different tiers and all that sort of thing. Sometimes we may go with 3, 4, 5, 8, 2. All kinds depends partially on what age we start things at as well. And what's being covered, what we want covered. So I talked last week, I said typically medieval university was about 5 years, I think it was typically, but ages started anywhere from 12 to like mid-20s. So you could have someone graduating at 17, potentially, or at 32 in some cases, with a Bachelor of Arts in those cases, or a Master of Arts. I think technically that would be potentially a Master of Arts. And that's going to determine a number of different things about terms of how long people are there, when people are entering different fields, where those could also come into play with how long do we think it takes to consider somebody to be competent in a field, in an area. So this is especially important for things like specialist type schools or arcane type schools. We may say, how long does it take till somebody is competent enough with magic to not be an accidental danger to themselves and others versus a purposeful danger. It's one thing if the wizard decides to fireball people because, they can. It's another thing if they, accidentally throw one and blow themselves up. Doesn't look good for the institution or whoever taught them and that sort of thing. So we may have a certain time span where we're saying this is kind of the minimum to be considered competent with this particular field or whatever it happens to be. Great one, town-gown relationships is a big question, both socially and legally. This is, the relationship between the institution and this town government or city government, institution and the city populace. Those are going to potentially be different things. Hey, how's it going? Jack? Just running through some questions that I have that I generally run down when I'm looking at fantasy, university education, that sort of stuff. For probably the past maybe 15-20 minutes or so. I gotten through founding, what's it cover, who can attend, physical space, tiers of students, onto kind of town-gown relationships. That could be social, that could be legal. in a number of cases. I think I talked last week, or I mentioned last week, that legally, historically speaking, in Western universities, there were big legal issues between cities and academic institutions and students particularly, so that legally speaking, students were tried, any student wrongdoing was tried in university courts, not in city courts, and this led to a lot of bad blood between cities and academic institutions and whatnot. But it could also be socially. For example, we have lots of examples in both records and in literature of members of city government being invited to and attending academic banquets on a regular basis as a means of bringing the town-gown relations into a good position. On the other hand, we have pro and con with the populace, which is a different setup than with the city leaders or city leadership. I can use my undergrad as an example of this. It was a small school in a small town surrounded by cornfields and soy fields, where some people in town we had good relations with. They joined our campus gaming community and all that sort of stuff. Other times you would have folks driving down the main streets through campus throwing beer bottles at students. So town-gown relations may shift around a fair bit. I can use my grad school as well as a good example of this, where this was the second president of the college while I was there, or university, got kind of upset because the local newspaper printed his salary, which is a matter of public record. People in town got ticked off because his salary was approximately 8 or 10 times the county average. So there was definitely some issues kind of going on there that came to a bit of a head in that situation. So town-gown relationships can be based on a lot of different things. You got based on the legal status of students and faculty and whatnot. It could be based on economics. Could be based on how people behave in various situations. One reason historically there were bad town-gown relationships were that because students were technically members of the clergy, if they were met with physical violence, that was an automatic excommunication that could only be lifted by a pilgrimage to the Pope. So somebody from, say, Paris would have to travel to the Vatican to get the Pope to basically lift the excommunication off of them. For a while, what this meant was that a lot of students in Paris were running around challenging people to duels or joining in riots and whatnot, trusting that their status as a student and the tonsure, their haircut, would basically protect them from any physical reprisals. This led to the University of Paris passing ordinances banning students from attending any kind of fencing schools or whatnot, because they had an unfair advantage in that they could not legally or spiritually, I guess, if you want to put it that way, be touched, but they could do whatever they wanted to their opponent, essentially. And this led to a lot of issues, a lot of social and political issues with the city, in many ways. With external relations, that kind of segues nicely into internal relations. And this gets back into the idea of factions that I think you were talking about last stream that I remember catching, Jack. I think you were looking at some factions and that sort of thing for the city, if I recall correctly. Internal divisions, we're always going to have them anytime we get a group of people together, as we well know. Yeah, definitely. So We've got things like the obvious ones for a academic institution would be departments, because departments are generally going to be vying with each other for funds, for faculty, for students, for facilities. And sometimes that can get very nasty. They may have their own alliances with other departments and their opposition to other departments. They could even get to the point where they are denigrating different departments and fields or areas. We could have internal divisions into colleges, depending on how big the place is. Oxford, for example, there are multiple colleges within Oxford, and they tend to have a bit of some rivalries with each other, where they're kind of going back and forth. Usually that comes out in the form of, hey there, welcome in. Those rivalries may just be sports rivalries, for example, or intramural rivalries, but they could also get into other issues coming into play there. If there are any internal groups, I'm going to use Yale as an example. We have the various secret society, quasi-secret societies of Yale. Everybody knows they're there, but they're a secret society. Yeah, anyway. You have your fraternities, you have your sororities, you have these secret societies. These will all be internal divisions, internal factions in various ways that will have their own kind of relationships with each other. At the very, very, very least, we would have administration, faculty, staff, and students as major factions in an academic setting. The faculty and administration generally are going at each other a fair bit. Staff may be kind of in between or working toward either one of those two or kind of on their own. Students tend to have issues with and relationships with all of those as well. So for internal divisions, we want to say, yeah, are there any? There probably are. Like I said, at the very least, we got administration, faculty, staff, students, and there may be some crossover in there. Particularly today, for example, most full-time faculty, we have subdivisions as well in there. We got full-time faculty and adjunct faculty are different factions as well in their own ways. These days, many full-time faculty are mostly administrators or largely administrators anymore, depending on what institution you're looking at. You may even have divisions, depending on what kind of institution this is. There may even be divisions between teaching faculty and non-teaching faculty. Non-teaching faculty could be research faculty, people who are hired to do research, not to teach, but could also be things like sports coaches. Back when I was in grad school, the place I was at, the basketball coach, the head basketball coach, was in the books, in the payroll as a member of the faculty. He was non-teaching faculty. Did not have to teach any classes or anything like that. Also got paid close to 10 times more than any other faculty person on campus. This obviously led to a lot of bad blood, bad relationships between the sports programs and the teaching faculty. So there were a lot of back and forth regarding that coming into play a lot as well. Let's see. Some of that stuff may get approached or partially dealt with through any kind of rules or ordinances the institution has. Back just one moment here. Slide myself back over with this. This book, which is I think out of print now, but you can find cheap. But there are cheap copies all over the place. Is a wonderful, wonderful resource. Personally, for thinking up various legal or rules or ordinances of various schools, because it has things like rules of the University of Paris. Rules for the termination in the arts. Rules concerning the rental of classrooms in Paris. Papal privilege. Let's see, what do we have in here? Early statutes of the Sorbonne. Regulation of booksellers, limitations on private teaching, all sorts of fun things. This is University Records and Life in the Middle Ages, translated by Lynn Thorndike. It's coming from Norton Press, so it's relatively easy to, it's out there. I've looked around, I've seen some copies floating around, but it's a fun book for kind of inspiration and such. I think at a minimum, though, particularly for fantasy situation, we want to think about things like, is there a curfew? And that may also go back to how old are students and that sort of thing at the place. Or is the place walled off, separated from the city or not? If it is walled off, then there's going to be probably a time when the gates close and the gates open, just like the city or town gates open and close. There could be policy regarding visitors, depending on what type of place we're dealing with. It could be kind of open. Anybody can come in, anybody can come out. It could be more limited or restricted. There could be policies regarding visitors in certain places. So maybe like, yeah, you can come onto the grounds anytime you want, but the residence areas are limited in terms of when people can come in, when people can come out. Or there may be a sign-in or something like that. There could be policies, particularly for a fantasy institution, regarding weapons, regarding armor, regarding magic use. There could be things like, yeah, you can't, we don't want any, we don't want 13-year-old students running around campus with swords for various reasons. We also don't want people just running around throwing magic in random places and that sort of stuff. There could be some kind of ordinance, rules, whatever, regarding uniforms or other denotations of membership in the institution, whether that be, an amulet or ring, I don't know, somebody, I've seen suggestions of things like tattoos or other various things. That seems a little bit permanent, depending on what type of institution you're dealing with. If it is a lifelong thing, then yeah, I could see that sort of side of things. But it could be something as simple as a signet ring. It could be an amulet. It could be a brooch or pin. It could be an actual full-on head-to-toe uniform. It could be a partial uniform. A good example of that these days would be the Oxford University's scholar robes, which are basically just worn over anything, and they are a kind of plain. If I recall correctly, they're mostly a plain black. They may have some trim to them. Or we can look at, say, the graduation robes or the stole that goes with the graduation robes. They have certain colors to denote certain things. So there's a lot of different options that come into play there. We also may want to look at, and this goes back to some other things with traditions, like we could have a opening and closing of the gates. Could be a tradition. We see that, for example, at the Tower of London, where there is a traditional opening and closing of the gates every day. And it goes through a full-on ceremony that's been going on for at least 600 years, 400 years, something like that. A walled or otherwise set-off institution could have the same idea coming into play. It could be something where there's a beginning of the year social at the chancellor's house or whoever's in charge of the place for new students or new hires, that sort of thing. That's something that my own undergrad did. Tied in with traditions, we could have legends or folklore that are specific to that particular institution. So there could be curses that come into play. Whether it be on particular buildings, on particular positions, on particular spaces within the place. There could be good luck rituals. There could be things of there's a particular statue and the beginning of whatever before something before a big exam or something that it's tradition to go run a hand over the statue for good luck or something along those lines. There could be not really hazing, but more in the lines of coming of age is coming to mind, but it's not really the word. Sort of maybe membership rituals of, say, minor, it could be, say, like minor theft, swiping something from a particular room or a particular public area or something like that. Or that could be part of both coming in and going out type sets. Case in point, where I did undergrad, pretty much everybody on campus at one point or another swiped something from the dining hall, whether that would be spare spoons or glasses or a tray to go sled riding in the winter because there was a hill nearby, or something along those lines. And or traditionally on that campus, because there were a lot of brick paths going through campus, and they, up until fairly recently, had a lot of bricks on the path that were stamped with the city name on them because a local company made the bricks. It was tradition for seniors to, before graduation, quietly, out of sight, subtly, whatever, swipe a brick to bring back to as a sort of graduation thing. The institution, the administration kind of looked the other way as long as nobody was too obvious about it. But it was just like it had gone on for 70, 80 years, maybe more than that. There was actually it was more than that because my in-laws went there and they had one. Or my grandparents-in-law went there and they had one, and they were there it would have been at least 80 years from now. So probably even longer than that, probably close to a century it's been going on. There was also, campus legend, campus folklore. For example, back to my undergrad school, we had one of the pieces of campus lore was that we had the main class building had a giant arch in it, or a big size arch going through basically the center of the building. And the campus lore was that if, in the winter, the arch was ever filled from top to bottom with snow, then classes the next day would be canceled. That never happened. There were also about 6 or 8 other doors into the building, so that wouldn't really make a difference anyway. But that meant every year, anytime there was a decent amount of snow that came down, hundreds, dozens, scores, hundreds of students would get together and spend hours during the night trying to fill the arch. And this was sort of almost a campus ritual of sort. It definitely led to a lot of camaraderie, a lot of linking up, connecting with people, and that sort of thing. So it was a lot of kind of community building in some regards. So that kind of, I think, those are kind of my big 9 questions or big 9 things, and some of these are kind of subsets. So I think about, and I'm kind of working this, as I said earlier on, I'm kind of working this myself with a project I'm doing right now, side thing. But I think about who founded it, what does it teach, who can attend, is it in one space or scattered? Is there one tier of students, multiple tiers of students? Tied in with that one, how long does it take to complete a time there to be considered or deemed competent with whatever it is? Town-gown relationships, any kind of internal divisions. At the very least, we're going to have at least 4 of those, probably more, which gets into your factions idea. Any important rules or ordinances, recommending at the very least things like curfew, policy for visitors, policy regarding, particularly for fantasy ones, policy regarding arms, armor, or magic, any kind of uniform, that sort of thing. I also, because of the one I'm working on right now, I also added in something about access to campus pubs. So each section has its own pub, or 2 pubs really, one for students, one for faculty. and the faculty one is open only to faculty and staff. And then what else? I think I added something else in there as well with that one that I was thinking about, and I can't think what it was offhand. Yeah, I can't think what it was. And then last but not least, like traditions, campus lore, campus legends, that sort of thing. Obviously, most of the stuff isn't necessary. I think the really important ones for kind of starting out, especially for if this is not going to be a focal area, are going to be the first 5 or 6. Probably the first 4 and 6. So who founded, what does it teach, who can attend, is it one space or scattered, and town-gown relationships are really probably the big things. Just to kind of have at least a rough idea of, so we know what's the relationship with the place that's around it, the society around it, and who's going there, what kind of background might we have for people who want for characters or people who want that as part of their background. And the rest is more kind of detail related in some regards. Not huge detail, but kind of base level details in some ways. Those are just kind of things thinking about with that. And kind of working with, again, a bit myself as things go through, just to kind of see what's there and what's working with it. Yeah, and getting into who founded, that can get a lot of that can start answering some of those questions in some respects. Whether it be the sort of a state founded or an individual founded or something along those lines. A couple of resources I really like regarding these, and I've got to see if I can find the other one here real quick. It's under, where did I put that? That's got to be in probably this folder, maybe. And here somewhere, possibly. Was it in there? Perhaps. Nope, not there. Was it in here? Maybe. Nope. That's all playtest stuff. That's something else. That is that. Those are those things. Why? It wouldn't be there. That's too old. I can't find it now. Okay, that's weird. I had a good example. Maybe I put it in the... yeah. There we go. Maybe it's in here. Or not. I cannot find it now. Let's see if I can look this up really quick. Nope. Shoot. Maybe that'll work. No. Okay. Darn it. There was a good example that I can't find now. I used to have on the free PDF of, and I can't find it now, which is annoying. Where would I have put that? I don't know. Anyway, that is an annoyance. That was something Academy. Just a minute. This is going to bother me. There it is. Okay, cool. Now, can I find that without... There we go. Reviews. There's a download. Okay, cool. I don't know why I don't have a copy of that lying around there. But anyway, I'm going to throw in chat a few good examples that I've played around with, looked at, seen. So the first one, there's a free PDF of floating around that doesn't have any kind of stat stuff with it. There's also a paid version that has stats. And that's the Redhurst Academy of Magic, which was put together by which was put together by Matt Forbeck, Seth Johnson, Timothy Gerritsen, David Gulisano, and Paul Tucher. But it's a Forbeck thing. Margaret Weiss was involved with putting together the foreword and all that fun stuff. It's got a good kind of breakdown and run through. I'm gonna put Matt Forbeck in there because it's on his site that's easily findable. Another good one that I really like is GURPS Illuminati University is a fun one to play with and take a look at. It does have a good breakdown it's based on Modern University and such, but it's got a good and it's parody, but it's got a good breakdown of a lot of different things we would maybe look for. And I'll also throw in the University Records in Life book. That's a nice little resource. I think all three of those are really nice resources, really good examples. Obviously, this is something that, and this is something I kind of brought up last week, is that, the academic setting within gaming seems to be coming back into a bit of a second life in some respects. Obviously got a big boost in the mid to late 90s. And I think these days with with things like Spelljammer Academy coming out of WotC, and even to a lesser extent Candlekeep, and some other things that I've seen floating around out there, it may be coming back in to another burst of interest with people. So there's some good things to kind of think about and play with that. Not just, I think that goes kind of beyond just my own kind of inclinations of working with things that I know and expanding things I know, because now that I have had many years on both sides of the coin as far as the student and the behind the scenes side of things with stuff. Just kind of bringing up a bunch of different possibilities, ideas, thoughts. Let's see. It's about an hour and a half. Okay, cool. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't know that half an hour is necessarily a good span for all of the different routes we can go with magic and society and their relationships to each other, because that can get all kinds of messy and screwy. So yeah, probably not. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can go in there later. Yeah, that can get very long, very deep. I think I will save that for next week. Maybe even tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to do a bonus tomorrow. We'll see. It's been kind of an interesting week. We've had the joys of being in the Midwest. The kids' winter break has been extended now 2 days because of snow and because of single-digit temperatures. So they don't want the little. Yeah, they don't want the elementary schoolers and the kindergartners standing out for buses when it's like 3 degrees out, for some weird reason. I will definitely be swinging in for that, or I will attempt to. We'll see if we will see if actually I'm going to see if this works. It doesn't really work, but okay, cool. I need to set something up for that. No problem. I can deal with that later. No, it doesn't really work there. I got to put that command into, I got to build a shout out command somewhere in there once I figure out how to do it. I got to play around with Nightbot. But anyway, that's something for future me to deal with. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe bounce things over. We've got, who all is up? Oh, we've got, they're still doing a marathon, I think. Yeah, Dorktails is still doing a marathon. Let's see. There's also, yeah, I think I'll bounce over to, yeah, I'll just be traditional. I'll bounce over to Noir's setup just for the heck of it. It'll be my traditional Tuesday motion. We'll see about being back to, whoops, wrong thing. Always the wrong thing. You'd think I would remember where things are over the course of things, but someday I will eventually remember how things work. So yeah, I think maybe next week I will bring in or tomorrow if I do a bonus run, which will probably be morning for magic stuff. And there we go.
Got your money right now. You're holding on some big giant bodybuilder type with his long beard, and while you are watching and cheering for him, somebody comes up behind you and